Okay, welcome back to the next part of the video. Let me unpause here. In the last video, we got the XR2 fueled up and ready to head back to Earth. And our intended goal is to arrive at Earth and in plane with the ISS and then use the atmosphere as a brake so that we can not have that large fuel expenditure. And then, of course, we'll rendezvous with the ISS eventually. And then after that, we'll deorbit, we'll undock, deorbit, and land back at KSC. But before we can do any of that, we've got to get up off the moon and head out. So let's go ahead and do all that now. Okay, so let's bring up line plane on this side, and I like to put in the inclination that Transx tells me, which is 44.18, then space, and then the longitude of the ascending node, which is also given to us by Transx. That's 4.41. By putting that information in, then when we lift up off the landing pad and head off to get into orbit around the moon, and that's going to be at a heading of about 75.5 degrees, so we're almost facing the right way as it is. We only need to rotate a little bit. But by having that information here also in a line plane, it can kind of help us get into orbit around the moon by being able to watch our rate, if is it negative or positive. If it's positive, then we need to, yaw a little bit. So that's why I put that in. You don't have to do it. You can just watch the relative inclination given to you by Transx. But I find that this actually can be a little bit easier almost. So there's nothing to wait for, because remember, our timing worked out that we're ready to go basically right away. So let's just make sure that we've got everything open that needs to be open. We've got the radiator deployed. Got the hover doors are already open. The retro doors are already open. Surface controls are off.
Rotation.
Go to rotation. And we can turn off external cooling.
Onboard O2.
And let me just go over things here in my mind. I like to just take a mental moment for myself before I lift up. Make sure I know exactly what I'm doing. Plus, it's actually been over a week, I believe, since I last recorded those other parts, so I'm not as well trained with Orbiter as I am when I'm doing this every day. It's been a while, so okay, I think we're ready to go. So we're just going to lift up. We're just going to rotate over here to this point, and then we're going to engage the main engines and head out.
Wheels up.
Okay,
APU offline.
start the APU.
Rotation.
I'm going to press L to keep myself level. I notice sometimes the XR2 tends to kind of tilt itself backwards, and that will actually cause you to drift backwards because the hover engines are on. So raise the landing gear.
Gear up and locked.
And we're going to rotate to 75.5. It's about right there. Now we'll go full throttle on the main engines. And we'll turn off the hover. Close the hover doors. Turn off that attitude hold now. Pitch up just a little bit. You can see we've already got way more vertical speed than we actually need. Now I'm just going to put in a little bit of yaw here to bring down the relative inclination. There you can see our rate is negative 0.003, so I can actually put in a little more yaw. And now I'm going to be done with that. I'm going to go ahead and bring up orbit on this side so I can pay attention to what's going on with the... And I'm going to actually start decreasing the main engines already. And on this side, I'm going to swing my green line a little bit. Get it closer to my current position. Swing my line of nodes, rather, the white line. You can see the relative inclination still coming down. Actually losing a little bit of altitude, but that's okay. We're high up. So I'm just going to put in a little bit more pitch, though. And you can see now the vertical speed's getting closer to 0. But I slowed myself down a little bit so I would have a little more time to get close, to get more in plane. Put in a little more yaw. Now I've overdone it. Okay. Now we can go level. And now we just watch the apoapsis. About right there. I'm off by exactly or almost exactly 1 kilometer again. I did the exact same thing last time.
Translation.
But we're fine. If I press DST, you can see our APR is 1.759. So I can just a couple taps of reverse translation and it's 1.758, which is what we said that we wanted it to be. Over here, 1.758. So now let's switch over to orbit, the orbit HUD. And let's go ahead and go prograde. I'm going to go ahead and use the autopilot to do that. We're 2,700 seconds away from apoapsis, so we've got a little while before we get over to that point. Let's check our relative inclination. We're pretty good, but we can do a little bit of correction there. And we can just use TransX for that. Let me switch over to this view so we have larger MFDs. And the way I do it by using TransX, there's a couple of options. We can either adjust the line of nodes so that we bring the white line to our current position, and then we can do a bit of an adjustment on the relative inclination, or we can just warp time forward until we cross the line of nodes the next time. Since we're so close to being in plane already, I'm just going to do a bit of an adjustment here. Of course, I'm adjusting the wrong thing, so let me fix that. Eject orientation, and we'll just swing that line of nodes right over top of our current position, and now
Rotation. Translation. Rotation.
actually get myself level.
Translation.
Now with just a little bit of translation, you can see that relative inclination coming down. About right there. And then as I warp time forward, as I cross the line of nodes here and here, I can do another adjustment if needed. But I think the next thing we're going to do is warp time forward to apoapsis so we can circularize our orbit. So let's do that, unless we cross the line of nodes first, in which case we'll see about doing any adjustments. I'm going to set up a maneuver again on this flight, but we won't have to worry about that till we're much closer to the eject point. You can see the line of nodes is actually kind of coming around. That's interesting. So basically what that tells me is that our relative inclination is so low that there's really no adjustment that needs to be made. But I'll check it again once we get more over that way. But for now, let's warp time forward until we're at apoapsis. Pretty close to that point. So let's rotate.
Rotation.
Put in 2 taps of yaw, and then we'll use 10x to speed ourselves up so that we get over to the prograde position more quickly. And I'm just using a little bit of control 3 there to slow down the yaw. I don't actually, in this case, want to just hit kill rotate, because if I do that, then as I warp time forward, it's just going to continue to drift. So by putting in a little bit of control 3 to offset the yaw, then as I warp time forward, it keeps me closer to the prograde position so that I don't have to continually make adjustments. But as I get closer to apoapsis, I'm going to go ahead and allow Burn Time Calculator to circularize my orbit for me. And I'm going to press MD so that it's time to apoapsis, and then press the CIR button, which will circularize. And I can obviously do this manually, but it's such a simple task that I'll just go ahead and allow Burn Time Calculator to do it. And as I explained in one of my other videos recently, I kind of almost think that doing this type of thing is more realistic. Once we get really close to time to ignition, I will press prograde to allow the autopilot to keep ourselves prograde for that small burst of main engine that's going to be needed to get this orbit circularized. And we can watch orbit MFD over here. See, our PEA is currently 1.7 kilometers, and as we burn here in just 5 seconds, and we're only putting in, it looks like 4 meters a second. And there we have it. Now our orbit's circular. So we're done with Burn Time Calculator. And as I come around here, cross over the line of nodes on that side, again, I will see if I need to do any adjustments with the relative inclination, but I'm going to say no, because again, it's swinging as I'm moving, so that tells me that I'm, already is the relative inclination is already very, very low, so I'm not going to worry about it. Now, before we get all the way over to the eject point, I will go ahead and set up a maneuver. So we come over here to stage 1, go to maneuver mode, turn that on, and we want to put in the amount of prograde that we can see as given here by the delta V. And I'm going to go right to medium because that's going to move quickly. We want 876.9. Doesn't have to be perfect, by the way, so don't worry about it if you see this change, if it goes from 876.9 and then suddenly you see it drop to 876.8, don't worry about that. But just put in whatever number you see at the moment. And there we have it. Now we need to go to the date, and this is very sensitive, so we're going to go backwards to hyper, and we're going to swing this forward. And this is saying, this is when we're going to do the maneuver. And we don't want to do the maneuver now, and we don't want to do it here. We want to do the maneuver when we're over here at the eject point. So we're going to swing this around until we can lay it straight over top of this position here. And it won't be exact because the date, this hyper setting isn't quite sensitive enough. There needs to be one more. And in Dimitri's version of TransX, there actually is an additional level of sensitivity. But at the moment, I'm using the default TransX because I kind of forgot about my other one. But here you can see we're a little bit too far back. And if we go here, we're a little bit too far forward. So we just want to get it as close to that point as we can. So there it's laid over top. But we have an issue here, and that's our TransX is favoring, one plan over the other. So we're going to come over here to stage 2, and we're going to go through all the variables in the eject plan, and we're going to reset them. So we're here at outward. We're just going to go with that one first, and we're going to reset it. Then we're going to go to prograde, because that's the next one that came up, and we're going to reset that. Then we're going to go to plane change and reset that one. Now that we've done that, you can see that we have the green line here. This is the maneuver. And once I've got the maneuver, what I like to do is come to view setup on this side and change the graph projection from plan to focus, because it just gives me a view that I'm more comfortable with looking at. I think you can do the same thing on this side. If we go to view setup and go to graph projection instead of plan, we can have focus on this side as well, which just looks a little better. And now we can do a little bit of refinement with our maneuver. So we're looking at, our projected orbit back here at Earth. This is according to the maneuver. This is what's going to happen. So on this side, if I go to, here I'm on stage 1, if I go to view maneuver, I can kind of play with these variables a little bit more. And I kind of want to be down to a hyper or alter setting because everything's sensitive at this point. And I want to just get things back to where they were, when I had the other plan set up. Because now we're saying that we're coming in below the surface of the Earth, and we don't want that. And we're saying that we're not going to be that close to the ISS. So by doing just a little bit of refinement here, and you can see these variables are quite sensitive, so it won't take much. As I'm adding in positive, though, it's bringing the orbit down. That's not what I want, so I'm going to go negative. That's putting me farther away from the ISS, but that's okay. We'll fix that with a different variable. But for starters, I just want to make sure that my orbit is up here, above the surface a little bit. And that's better, something out there. And now we can look at what outward will do as far as helping us gain the time that we need so that the ISS will be close to our position. I'm going to go all the way to an alter setting and see if plus helps. Let's actually go super. Okay, that's helping, but it's pushed our orbit up here now. So let's go back to prograde, and I believe we'll need negative to bring it down. And I'm just going to keep adding negative until I can see the green line, unless I'm going the wrong way with it, in which case I'll need positive. Okay, there. I need to be able to see where the orbit's at. So there, I've got the green line showing up. So let's add in a little more positive to bring that down. And let's go back to outward. And let's go back to prograde because I don't want to lose track of where that green line's at. And back to outward, and this should do it. Okay, so this has us coming back to the Earth, and we're saying that our orbital altitude when we get back to Earth is going to be a little bit lower than the orbital altitude, the ISS, but we also know that that's wrong, and that it's actually going to come down, but we don't know by how much. And we're also saying that the ISS should be close to us when we get back, and that's also what we want. Even though we're going to be traveling much faster than the ISS, when we hit the atmosphere, we're going to slow down. But I don't really know how to anticipate how much distance I need between myself and the ISS. So I'm just going to have myself be very close, because in the last time I tried this, when I had the ISS out here in front of me by, you know, a 1/16 of an orbit or so, it was way too much. It was way far off. So I'm going to say that I want it to be much, much closer. Okay. So that's the maneuver. That's what I want it to look like. Now let's warp time forward to get over to the ejection point. Get closer to that point anyway. But let me come to view target on this side. We're not going to go all the way to the begin burn point and then do the burn. What we're going to do is we're going to get to at least 600 seconds away from the burn, which is 10 minutes. And then we're going to update the maneuver to make sure that things haven't changed significantly. The maneuvers can only be trusted by a few hundred seconds at a time. So if you set up a maneuver and then warp time forward by 1,000 seconds or 2,000 seconds, then you need to stop several hundred seconds before you get to the time to begin burn and check everything out. This is especially important when you have a maneuver that you set up 15 or 20 or 30,000 seconds in advance. It's really important then, but it's also still important when your maneuver is more than, 1,000 seconds away. So let's warp time forward. Okay, there we are. We're less than 10 minutes, so let's go back to view maneuver. And what we'll do is we'll come to the update, hit ++ to make sure everything is current, and it still looks good. We didn't see anything just suddenly jump significantly, and I wouldn't expect it to because we weren't that terribly far away from the time to do the burn. But you will see, things jump significantly when you warp time forward by 2, 3, 4,000 or 5,000 seconds. When you go back, when you get close to the time to do the burn and you do an update, you might suddenly see your lines jump way off, and then you got to make an adjustment. Okay, but we'll just trust it at this point since we're only, 500 seconds out. So let's warp time forward, get closer to the time to do the burn. We're not too far away, so let's go ahead and get rotated now. Put in 2 taps of yaw and then 10x over. And instead of kill rotate, we'll just put in a little bit of 3 to dampen the yaw. And hopefully that'll do it. Okay, we're 60 seconds out now. Okay, let's get lined up. We've got our green X pretty much perfectly on the center there. So we're going to do this burn in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, and burning. And as I've stated before, the advantage of going through the extra step of setting up the maneuver is that we get view target, and that gives us the ability to put the green X on the center position, which is the equivalent of trying to track the semi-major difference in relative inclination, but it's easier if you do this. Reducing main engines. Okay.
Translation.
I'll just translate the green X back to center. And a little bit of translation for the last couple meters per second. Okay, we've got 0.00. We like that. So let's go back to View, Maneuver, and turn the maneuver off. And everything looks pretty good. Now that maneuver mode's off, Transx should be updating everything more or less in real time, and then we've got a nice approach here at Earth. Of course, this is all going to change, but it looks good at the moment. And there's something I can check here. We just did the burn, so ideally in a perfect world, the ISS will be, let me fix the wording again, the moon's position will be approximately very close to crossing the orbital plane of the ISS. See how close we were this time. Looks like it's either spot on or maybe the moon is slightly past. It looks like it's slightly past. So maybe we were just a couple minutes late, but I think the timing was better this time than before. Okay, so this time the moon is a little bit past. So we needed to do the burn. In a perfect world, we needed to do it a little bit sooner, but it doesn't matter. When you're within this vicinity, you know, probably, I don't know exactly what the, how far out you can be, but several hours on either side and you're fine. And I think there might actually be a slight advantage to doing the burn after the moon's passed that orbital plane, just due to the inaccuracies of the MFDs. I think it may actually work out better if you do the burn slightly late. We'll actually find out in this video. Let's go back to the ISS, or rather the XR2. And I'm going to actually go ahead and Control S here, save at this point. And actually, I'll go ahead and end the video here as well. I was thinking that I would just save, but not in the video, but I think I'll go ahead and end this video here and do another part. But the reason I want to save here is because this is it's a good time to save right after that burn's done, so that if you want to pick back up from that point and go back out to the Earth to try different things, then it's really good to save immediately after that burn is done. Another good save point would be after you lift up off the landing pad and get into orbit around the moon and circularize your orbit. It's probably good to save at that point. That way, if you mess something up and you need to start over, then you don't have to start over on the landing pad. You're already in orbit. So anyway, if you like this part of the video, go ahead and leave a comment down below, and I will see you in the next part. Pause.